Hello and welcome to How to Start a Business, the podcast online course that teaches you everything you need to know to launch your own successful business. I'm your host, Debbie, and I'm here to guide you through this exciting journey. In this course, we'll cover topics such as choosing a business idea, writing a business plan, funding your business, creating your products or services, marketing your business, selling your products or services, managing your finances and taxes, and scaling your business. By the end of this course, you'll have the skills and knowledge to start and grow your own business in any field you're passionate about. This is episode 8 of the course, and today we're going to talk about how to create your products or services. Your products or services are the core of your business. They are what you offer to your customers to solve their problems or needs. They are what generate value and revenue for your business. But how do you create your products or services? What are the steps and processes involved in developing, testing, and launching your products or services? What are the best practices and tips for creating high-quality and customer-oriented products or services? What are the tools and resources you can use to help you? In this episode, we'll answer these questions and more. We'll also share some examples of successful products or services from different businesses and explain why they work. So let's get started. The first step in creating your products or services is to define your value proposition. Your value proposition is a statement that summarizes what your products or services do, how they benefit your customers, and why they are better than your competitors. Your value proposition is essential for communicating your unique selling point and attracting customers. To define your value proposition, you need to consider some factors such as the problem or need of your customers. What is the main challenge or pain point that your customers face? How does it affect their lives or businesses? The solution or benefit of your products or services. How do your products or services solve the problem or need of your customers? What are the features and advantages of your products or services? The difference or edge of your products or services. How do your products or services stand out from the competition? What makes them unique and superior? To define your value proposition, you can use some techniques such as customer research, conduct surveys, interviews, focus groups, or observations with your potential customers to understand their problems, needs, preferences, and expectations. You can use online tools like SurveyMonkey or Typeform to create and distribute surveys, Zoom or Skype to conduct interviews, user testing or UserZoom to conduct user testing, and more. Competitor analysis. Analyze the strengths and weaknesses of your competitors' products or services. You can use online tools like SimilarWeb or SEMrush to research their website traffic, keywords, and backlinks, Social Blade or BuzzSumo to research their social media presence and engagement, Product Hunt or Capterra to research their product reviews and ratings, and more. Value Proposition Canvas. Use a framework like the Value Proposition Canvas by Strategyzer to map out how your products or services fit with your customers' problems and needs. You can use online tools like Canvanizer or Miro to create and share a value proposition canvas. Once you have defined your value proposition, you need to write it down in a clear and concise way. You can use online tools like Thrive Themes Headline Optimizer or CoSchedule Headline Analyzer to write and test different versions of your value proposition. The next step in creating your products or services is to develop a minimum viable product, MVP. An MVP is a version of your product or service that has the minimum features and functionality needed to test its viability and validate its value proposition. An MVP is useful for getting feedback from early adopters, learning from mistakes, improving your product or service, and saving time and money. To develop an MVP, you need to consider some factors such as the features and functionality of your product or service. What are the essential and desirable features and functionality of your product or service? How do they align with your value proposition and customer needs? The resources and constraints of your product or service. What are the available and required resources and constraints of your product or service? How do they affect the scope, quality, and cost of your product or service? The feedback and validation of your product or service. How will you collect and analyze feedback and validation from your early adopters? How will you measure the success and failure of your product or service? To develop an MVP, you can use some techniques such as feature prioritization. Prioritize the features and functionality of your product or service based on their importance and feasibility. You can use online tools like Product Plan or AHA to create and manage a feature roadmap. Prototyping. Create a mock-up or a simulation of your product or service that demonstrates its features and functionality. You can use online tools like Figma or Balsamiq to create and design a prototype, InVision or Marvel to create and test a prototype, and more. Testing. Test your prototype with your early adopters to get feedback and validation. You can use online tools like User Testing or UserZoom to conduct user testing, Hotjar or Crazy Egg to conduct heat maps and recordings, Google Analytics or Mixpanel to conduct analytics and tracking, and more. Once you have developed an MVP, you need to launch it to the market. You can use online tools like WordPress or Shopify to create and host a website for your product or service, MailChimp or ConvertKit to create and send email campaigns for your product or service, Facebook ads or Google ads to create and run ads for your product or service, and more. The next step in creating your products or services is to iterate and improve your product or service. Iteration is the process of making changes and enhancements to your product or service based on feedback, validation, learning, and data. Iteration is important for improving the quality and value of your product or service, satisfying your customers, and staying ahead of the competition. To iterate and improve your product or service, you need to consider some factors such as the feedback and validation of your product or service. What are the positive and negative feedback and validation from your customers? What are the strengths and weaknesses of your product or service? What are the opportunities and threats for your product or service? The data and metrics of your product or service. What are the quantitative and qualitative data and metrics of your product or service? How do they relate to your goals and objectives? How do they compare to your benchmarks and standards? The changes and enhancements of your product or service. What are the possible changes and enhancements that you can make to your product or service? How do they align with your value proposition and customer needs? How do they affect the scope, quality, and cost of your product or service? To iterate and improve your product or service, you can use some techniques such as feedback analysis. Analyze the feedback and validation from your customers using methods such as surveys, interviews, reviews, ratings, comments, testimonials, referrals, complaints, suggestions, etc. You can use online tools like SurveyMonkey or Typeform to create and distribute surveys, Zoom or Skype to conduct interviews, Product Hunt or Capterra to research product reviews and ratings, and more. Data analysis. Analyze the data and metrics of your product or service using methods such as analytics, tracking, testing, experiments, etc. You can use online tools like Google Analytics or Mixpanel to conduct analytics and tracking, Hotjar or Crazy Egg to conduct heat maps and recordings, Optimizely or VWO to conduct A/B testing and experiments, and more. Change management. Manage the changes and enhancements of your product or service using methods such as planning, prioritizing, implementing, testing, reviewing, etc. You can use online tools like Product Plan or AHA to create and manage a change roadmap, Trello or Asana to create and manage a change workflow, GitHub or Bitbucket to create and manage a change repository, and more. Once you have iterated and improved your product or service, you need to relaunch it to the market. You can use online tools like WordPress or Shopify to update and host your website for your product or service, MailChimp or ConvertKit to update and send email campaigns for your product or service, Facebook ads or Google ads to update and run ads for your product or service, and more. And that's it. You've just learned how to create your products or services. Congratulations! You've taken another big step in making your business real and valuable. In the next episode, we'll talk about how to market your business. Stay tuned for that. Thank you for listening to How to Start a Business, the podcast online course that teaches you everything you need to know to launch your own successful business. I hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something valuable. If you did, please leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me at debbie@yenloft.com.ng. I'd love to hear from you and help you with your business journey. Until next time, this is Debbie, signing